Oh my God. The old man's heart rate is up. Woo. In this episode of Killing a Duramax, we're changing the injectors and going for 800 horsepower. I'm Gale Banks. Welcome back to Dyno Cell number 2. As you may have seen in our unboxing video, S&S sent us a set of Denso 50-over injectors for this L5P. At 711 horsepower, we were crowding the limit. There was no more headroom. I'm confident we're going to have enough fuel now to go to 800 horsepower and some more. But do we have enough Duramax to make that trip? We're about to find out. Aaron, fire in the hole. All right, Mike has changed out the injectors to a set of 50-over S&S Diesel Motorsports units. Will give us greater flow in less on time. We were crowding the crank rotation limit that I set for myself of 40 degrees. That's my rule of thumb. And through the decades, I found if I push that, we get EGT, the engine becomes inefficient, it goes to smoke, everything gets wrong. We pulled 711 horsepower at 3,300 recently. The rotation angle of the on time was 39.3 degrees. No headroom left for my 40 number. And as far as EGT, that was getting hot-ish. We were at 1,522 degrees turbine in. I'd love to see that number come down too. So Aaron, let's pull 711 horsepower again. I'll keep my eyes on what's going on, and especially the turbine inlet temperature. Go ahead and fire up the data logger. I love the DataMonster. These iDash instruments are magic to me. Here we go. Now guys, you gotta understand, that engine is absolutely stock inside. We've changed the turbocharger, we've changed the oil cooler, but everything inside that engine is dead stock. And we're going for another 711 horsepower pull. Yeah, I'm nervous, a little bit nervous. I hope we don't put any windows in the side of that block. All right, 3,300. Yeah. Turbine in, about 1,100 degrees. There comes the power. 620, 640. 670. Turbine in, 1470. There we are, 711 horsepower. We went a little bit over it. Let's pull it back and get the data. Woo, baby. The old man's heart rate is up. Woo. All right. I'm going to brain drain this thing, look at the results. Everything looks happy. We're going for 800 horsepower. All right. We're looking pretty good with the 50 over S&S injectors at 711, 3,300 RPM. Our maximum cylinder pressure was 225 bar, so our pressure sensor will go to 250. I think we might knock on the door of that in our next run, because I want to go for 800 horsepower, that is. The injection crank angle is looking quite good. Crank rotation during the injection event went from 39.3 to 31.5. We're looking pretty good there. Our on time dropped 20%. And that's with a fuel rail pressure of 2100 bar. We're setting for 2300 bar now. And to do that, we had to hot rod the fuel system a bit because our lift pump pressure was falling. Our coolant flow rate on these tests at 3,300 RPM, especially like with the oil filter and cooler and all that we did the other day, is 135 gallons a minute. So it's trucking right through there. The 711 test, coolant into the engine was 204 Fahrenheit and coolant out was 214. So we had a delta T across the engine of 10 degrees. I like to work anywhere from 8 degrees across the engine to 12 degrees. That's my window where I like to be. Air-fuel ratio was surprisingly lean at 19:1, which gives me some overhead. Compressor outlet temp on that 711 run was 412 degrees. That's making me a bit nervous. Turbo speed was only 100,000 RPM, and turbine inlet temperature was 1486. That's 1472 is the maximum allowed on a stock L5P ECU or ECM, whether you're calling it an engine control unit or an engine control module. I'm going over to engine control module. I'm going to stop using ECU soon. So we're going to go for 800, and I'm setting some limits. We've set our alarm for air-fuel ratio at 16.7. I'm looking for 17:1 is as rich as I really want to go. If we go past it and we're not looking, it'll tell us. We've set the turbine inlet temperature, which is displayed on both these gauges. We've set that alarm at 1600, I believe, right? And that about covers the three critical things: turbo speed, turbine in, and air-fuel ratio that would stop the test. I don't want to go richer than 17:1, so how about, let's get Gale's heart rate up. Let's bang this turkey. Let's build a little oil temp. Mess with that a little bit. We're looking at cylinder pressure here. And you can see the peak. Here's top dead center right here. There's injection. Currently, the point of injection will move around because we advance with RPM. So there's injection. It really gets firing here. So this will move around. The peak will move around a little bit. We're currently at 80 bar, about 145 horsepower. Just building a little heat in it. Oil temp's looking good. Let's go ahead and pull it, or push it in this case. Let's bang this turkey. All right, 300, 400. Come on, 400. Come on, baby. Boost pump. There we go. Dyno boost is on. 650 horsepower. Can you pull the RPM down at all? 7. That's all we got, huh? Okay, let's go for 800. 820, 30. Coming down to 17. Keep.
Our cylinder pressure was way over 250.
I don't care about that. I don't care about the cylinder pressure being over 250. I don't care. It wasn't one of my limits.
We were this side of 1600, so I just did it.
1600 what?
Turbine intent.
Yeah, I know.
We were at like 1590, I think.
And we were about 17.3.
Yeah, so we were.
We were closing in on it, but I was tasting like 840 or 850 there.
What did we get to?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm so busy watching the critical stuff. Ah!
852.
852?
Yes.
You saw it, huh?
So we could have done 860.
852?
Why didn't you stop
Why
us,
didn't you
Jay?
stop us, Jay? What?
The engine's still
Oh,
intact.
that 852.
Engine's still running.
Oh my God. There's no parts on the floor, no oil on the wall. There's no smoke.
I don't think we're gonna kill it.
852? No. We were coming up on our limits though.
I saw him coming.
Yeah,
fast.
yeah. I saw 17.3, so we were getting rich. You're seeing 1600 coming up on the EGT.
So the cylinder pressure.
Nobody's looking at the turbo speed at the
Oh, it
time.
was fine. It's still intact as well.
Yeah, everything's
The,
intact. Yeah.
The cylinder pressure read 255.
Oh, it actually read 255?
I assume that over 250 it's just really not accurate.
Well, you know
It
what?
can't be that far off.
I guess not, but the sensor is good to 250 according to the guys that make them, and you kill it at 300. But how do you know if you get there if it's only good to 250?
Yes,
We're pumping some cylinder pressure on those stock head bolts, stock head gaskets. We're pumping temperature into those stock pistons with a stock oil pump and a 2020 oil cooler, which does help. I think I need that data. Let's see what we actually did. I can't wait. 852 horsepower. Oh my God. Okay, I got some numbers for you here. We made 711 with stock injectors, and then we made 711 with 50% over injectors from S&S. Those injectors have some other tweaks. They don't just flow more. They come off the seat quicker, they close quicker, and they modulate better in between those extremes. They're hot rodded, and these guys know what they're doing. We just used less fuel, less air, and made the same horsepower at a lower exhaust gas temperature, turbine inlet temperature. And all that we changed was the injectors and the calibration in our Banks AutoMind ECM. I can't wait to get to this data. This is going to be cool. In both cases, we're right at 3,300 RPM. In both cases, 711 horsepower. The torque is within 4 pound-feet. That's due to the slight RPM difference at the same horsepower, though. The air-fuel ratio is interesting. We leaned it out 3.8%. It was at 18.3 with the stock injectors, and we're at 19-1. We've got some excess air going on here. The exhaust gas temperature went from 1522 to 1486. 2.4% reduction in exhaust gas temperature. That's wonderful. The main injection crank angle in degrees. This is the rotation of the crank during injection. My maximum is 40 degrees. My sweet spot is 30 to 35 degrees. What happened here? We were at 39.3 degrees. Now we're at 31.5. So we reduced the injection crank angle by almost 20%. At the same time, our fuel burn in pounds per hour went from 271 to 255 pounds per hour. That's a reduction in fuel usage of 8%. Or that's 8% better fuel economy at the same horsepower. Pretty magic changing these injectors. Where we found the maximum cylinder pressure, that's even better. We were at 4.8 degrees after top dead center. Now we're at 8.3 degrees after top dead center. So we moved that maximum cylinder pressure point 3.5 degrees of crank rotation. That might not sound like much, but when you're at top dead center, the piston, the rod, and the crank arm and the main are all lined up with each other. There's no mechanical advantage. If you pushed on the piston right there and the engine was stopped, there wouldn't be much motion. It would just be there. As the piston comes down the bore, that rod angle changes and the crank is rotating and you're getting a mechanical advantage through the rod to the crank arm. The further it rotates, in my experience, hitting maximum cylinder pressure at 8 to 12, somewhere in there, seems to be pretty good. In this case, we went from 4.8 to 8.3, so we're starting to get a better torque output versus cylinder pressure. Our cylinder pressure was 231 bar, now it's 225. We've got a lower cylinder pressure, but it occurs at a much more advantageous crank angle or crank rotation. I hope you guys followed me through that one. On the turbocharger, we required less fuel, 8%. We also required less air. So what happened was the compressor outlet temperature, which I'm trying to hold around 400 degrees Fahrenheit maximum, went from 404 to 397.8. So we actually unloaded the compressor a bit. Why was that? How did that happen? Look at the exhaust manifold air density. This is the density of the air per 1,000 cubic feet. It took less air density, less fuel, to make the same power. The air density reduction is 4.7%. So you've got a 4.7% lower air density requirement and an 8% lower fuel requirement. So you're starting to see where we're going here. The exhaust manifold pressure also went down from 39.6 pounds to 38.2 pounds, about 3.6% reduction in exhaust manifold pressure. Why is that meaningful? It's meaningful because lower exhaust manifold pressure means more exhaust gets out of the cylinder on the exhaust stroke, leaving less in the cylinder when you fill with your manifold air density through the intake ports and into the cylinder. How do you measure that? The way I do it is I do a calculation of if I got all the manifold air density into the cylinder, that would be a 100% cylinder fill. We went from an 81% cylinder fill, and that's the percentage of manifold air density that gets into the cylinder, to an 84.3%. So we picked up the cylinder fill by 4.1%. If you're filling the cylinder better because your exhaust pressure went down, because the turbine requires less horsepower because it's doing less work driving the compressor, you see where this is all going. All of this occurred because of the injection rate. So the injection rate gives us the ability to move things around like timing, etc., to move rail pressure around. And although I'm not showing it here, we actually move the rail pressure from 2300 bar to 2100 bar and still made the same horsepower. What we were doing there is adjusting the fuel injection rate, the rate of fuel going in per degree of crank angle. Why are we doing that? To take advantage of the amount of air we've got present. We have a very, very lean mixture here because at 19:1, we have excess air. That's a wonderful place to be. But what happened after we put the injectors in and made the 711, and we just did the comparison, it's what happened when we cranked it that I like. So now we're going to compare the 711 with the 50 over injectors to the 852 with the 50 over injectors. This is really revealing. Okay, first thing I want you to notice is 711 was closer to 3,300. The 852 was closer to 3,400. We've got to make some adjustments on the dyno. We couldn't pull it down any more than that. It went from 1,126 pound-feet at 3,300 nominally to 1,322 pound-feet just below 3,400. We have a booster on our dyno to boost the torque capacity, and we're going to have to add to that booster flow rate to go up from here. To get 1,322 pound-feet of torque at the horsepower peak, God knows what the torque is downstairs. We're not going there right now. I'm chasing the top end, and then we can tune all the way back down with whatever final turbo setup we have. Air-fuel ratio is kind of troubling me. We were at 19:1, and now we're at 17:2. We're going rich because we're running out of turbocharger, and I don't want to frag the turbocharger. I had set a nominal kind of floor of around 17 to 1. We got close to that. The exhaust gas temperature now is going up. It's up 7.5%. So the cure for the air-fuel ratio and the exhaust gas temperature both are more air. Now let's go on into the injection itself. The injection crank angle has gone up from 31.5 degrees to 35.2. So we're up almost 12% on injection crank angle. I don't want to go any further than that. The cure to that's bigger injectors. The fuel burn rate, 255 pounds per hour, we're up to 317. So we're up 24.3% on fuel burn rate, but we're only up 20% on horsepower. So you see what's happening. The engine's getting less efficient. The crank angle at maximum cylinder pressure is going backwards on us as well. We went from 8.3 back to 6.3 degrees after, so we're losing engine efficiency there. Bigger injectors will help us with that. And the last thing that bigger injectors will help is the maximum cylinder pressure itself. Remember, we had a drop in maximum cylinder pressure when we went from 711 to 711 with the larger injectors. Now let's get to the turbocharger compressor section. The outlet temperature, we want to hold nominally 400 degrees Fahrenheit, but we went a little bit above that. We went to 452. So the increase from 711 optimized to 852, which is now suboptimal, is 55 degrees. Look at the manifold air density, the MAD. This is the density of the air in the intake manifold in pounds per 1,000 cubic feet. Our manifold air density went from 247 to 284, about a 14.8% increase in manifold air density. And we're virtually done. I mean, we're pushing that compressor so hard. We might be able to get more with the same compressor, and I'll show you how. The exhaust manifold pressure went from 38 to 51. It's 34.3% greater exhaust manifold pressure to achieve 14.8% increase in manifold air density. Something's going south here, and I think we've got the turbocharger about as far as it can go. But the tell that we're going backwards here is the cylinder fill percentage. It went from 84.3 back to 82%. How do I resolve the exhaust manifold pressure and cylinder fill? Well, I want to get more exhaust out of the cylinder. I want to push that 82% back up. That would make it easier. In other words, with less work from the turbocharger compressor, I could get in the same amount of air. Or if I want more air, I could come back up to this level of work. I know now that we can go over 450 compressor discharge temperature and not frag the turbo at this shaft speed. I'm really in no man's land though, because if I call Precision and talk to them about it, they tell me 400. So we're kind of dancing, it's like walking a tightrope here. So I want to get the cylinder fill percentage up. I need bigger piping. And why do I need bigger piping? Because I found this. We've got a little over 51 pounds of exhaust manifold pressure. Why is that? The turbine inlet pressure is much lower than that. The piping between the exhaust manifold and the turbine inlet is the problem. We've already put much larger up pipes on this thing. This is going to have to go beyond routing the up pipes in a standard way. And also on this L5P, the turbocharger is shoved way forward, so you've got this casting, and then there's a change in direction. There's a lot of loss in this whole piping system. And the exhaust pipe coming out of the turbine gives us another place to gain some reduction in back pressure. We're over 2 pounds of back pressure, no restrictions, no mufflers, no nothing. It's 4-inch all the way into our 10-inch pipes outside. I think we need to go to 5-inch, like we've been doing on a lot of the late model diesel pickups. We've got 7 pounds of loss between the exhaust manifold and the turbine inlet, plus we've got over 2 pounds of loss after the turbine. That's 9 pounds. If I can reduce the back pressure the manifold pressure by 9 pounds, then the cylinder fill percentage is going to go up with the same manifold air density present, and we'll be able to go further. So if the stock injectors support 445 horsepower and we went 50 over, that's about 670 horsepower. We made 711. We're right there. If we're going to go more, then I think we need to go to 100 over injectors and give us some more headroom to go even further, because at 852, we're out of injectors again. So it's bigger injectors, tweak the cold air intake, resolve the up-pipe situation, bigger exhaust, and we're on our way to 900 horsepower. I want to do this without going inside the engine. What would you suggest we do? Put that in the comments below, and I'll see you at 900 horsepower.